weekend at the G7, when President Trump was asked if he attended the meeting at the G7 that was about climate, the president responded by saying that that meeting had not yet happened yet, that it was going to be next, the next thing, like the next thing in the future. In fact, the meeting had already happened, and he just hadn't been there. Then the White House press secretary put out a formal statement explaining that the reason the president hadn't gone to the climate session was not because it was still in the future, as far as he was concerned, but instead because at the time of the climate meeting, he was busy. He was having bilateral meetings with the leaders of India and Germany. Well, here's a picture of the climate meeting that he didn't go to. There's the leader of Germany in the purple there. That's the leader of India in the black. The Indian and German leaders were there. President Trump didn't skip the climate meeting so he could meet with the two of them. They were at that meeting. Had he been meeting with them, he'd have to do it there because that's where they were. He's the only one who wasn't there. His empty chair is there instead. Our current leadership, most of what the rest of the world is doing on this subject when it comes to us, is they're laughing at us and occasionally taunting us.
Bing, bing, windmills. If it doesn't blow, you can forget about television for that night.
Mr. President, I want to present you to the greatest deal you have ever seen. It is so great that I thought I might actually get your attention by standing here next to this bird-killing, cancer-causing, blackout-generating, wind energy-producing beast here. My name is Ida Auken. I'm a member of the Danish Parliament. And now that you're here, let's talk about the deal.
Okay.
It's about cheap energy and saving the climate. Here's an example. The North Sea region, that's the sea on top of Europe, can produce twice as much electricity as all the coal-fired power plants of Europe combined. And look, it's smaller than Nebraska. Imagine the possibilities in all of your great United States of America.
Darling, I want to watch television. I'm sorry. The wind isn't blowing.
Oh yeah, the blackouts. Don't worry about your TV dinners and movie nights. In Denmark, where most of our electricity comes from wind, we have on average 15 minutes of blackouts every year. Whereas in US, with all your coal-fired plants, you go dark on average 2 hours every year.
Our country is in serious trouble.
So, Mr. President, we all know you can do this. Just grab your pen, sign a deal, and let's save the climate.
The president was asked by a reporter at the G7, Mr. President, any second thoughts on escalating the trade war with China? And he answered, yeah, sure, why not? The reporter followed up, second thoughts? Yes? The president said, might as well. The reporter tried again, you have second thoughts about escalating the war with China? The president's response, I have second thoughts about everything. At which point somebody distantly in the room started laughing out loud because they couldn't control themselves. I mean, if this were anybody involved in the United States government in any official capacity who spoke this way publicly at an international gathering like this, right? Their colleagues or their superiors or at least security would like lift them up by the armpits and rush them out the door, right? Until they could be revived or given medical treatment.
I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay?
In this case, it's the president and everybody goes like, okay, I guess their new line is the American president has second thoughts about everything. When the president doesn't show up for meetings, we'll just make stuff up about that meeting having not happened or him having been somewhere where he wasn't. I mean, after the president told reporters explicitly he was having second thoughts about his new tariffs on China, the administration had to figure out what they were going to do with that one, right? I have second thoughts about everything. They quickly mounted this sort of cleanup effort. 3:02 p.m., Larry Kudlow went on CNN to explain that maybe the president had just given that answer to reporters because he didn't really know what the question was. Maybe that's a good explanation.
So the president said that he's having second thoughts about escalating the trade war. Why?
Well, look, if I can reinterpret that, I mean, he spoke to us. He didn't exactly hear the question.
If I could reinterpret that. He didn't hear. That was 3:02 p.m. By 3:04 p.m., It was the Treasury Secretary on Fox News, also trying to explain away whatever it was the president had just said about his second thoughts and how he didn't really mean that. The biggest ballrooms, the best ballrooms in Florida, the best ballrooms in Florida. Also, did I mention our parking facilities? We're very nearby the airport. Our bungalows have very luxurious views.
Well, we have a series of magnificent buildings. We call them bungalows. They each hold from 50 to 70 very luxurious rooms with magnificent views. We have incredible conference rooms, incredible restaurants. It's like such a natural. And we have many hundreds of acres so that in terms of parking, in terms of all of the things that you need, the ballrooms are among the biggest in Florida and the best.
If the president did do this and decided that his privately owned for-profit business would be the host of the next G7, that would, in effect, be forcing other countries' governments to pay him and his family in order to attend the G7. And that, among other things, would be fantastically unconstitutional. But nevertheless, I kid you not, today the official White House Twitter feed repackaged those lucid and even excited comments by the president at his otherwise shockingly incoherent international appearance over these last few days. They clipped and captioned those comments as an official announcement. Look, it's the White House Twitter feed. This is not real Donald Trump, right? The White House Twitter feed. Quote, President Donald Trump shares the location of the next G7 summit hosted by the United States.
Secretary of Defense James Mattis is breaking his silence and sharing some of his thoughts on the Trump administration. Mattis's public criticism comes on the heels of a particularly frenetic 2-week period with President Trump, who referred to himself as the chosen one, and canceled a trip to Denmark because that country refused to sell him Greenland, an island that was not for sale.
When the president would say, well, here's what I want to do, and here's how I want to do it. And I'd have to say to him, well, Mr. President, I understand what you want to do, but you can't do it that way. It violates the law. It violates the treaty. You know, he got really frustrated.
When the process breaks down, then you're sort of, in my mind, living in chaos. I don't want to live in a chaotic organization.
Well, General Mattis resigned in protest, of course, back in December of 2018 after President Trump announced the complete withdrawal of U.S. troops in Syria, a move he would later rescind. Well, according to the Atlantic interview, Mattis objected, telling the president, you're going to have to get the next Secretary of Defense to lose to ISIS. I'm not going to do it.
All these buildings with his name on it in the United States are owned by foreign powers, a lot of which are in the Middle East. None of that seems to really matter.
Trump, the strong man, allies himself with others who are strong, quoting Mussolini, flattering Vladimir Putin.
He's actually liked in his country, which is hard to believe, because he's essentially a dictator. And I think he has an 80% approval rating, which, you know, any politician in this country would love to have. Now we're talking about waterboarding.
Strong men also talk tough, pressed about the legality of torturing terror suspects, even killing their families. Trump said this about the generals who would report to him as commander-in-chief.
And I'm a leader. I'm a leader. I've always been a leader. I've never had any problem leading people. If I say do it, they're going to do it.